Good Thursday morning, everyone. How's it going? Hope you're going well. Got a little bit of Seahawks news to go over this morning. Before I get into the actual meat of this video, though, we'll be streaming live with the Hawks Nest tonight. Don't know exactly when, but it's going to be sometime around 6 to 7. It's going to be on this channel. We're going to talk about the defensive coordinator search. We're going to talk about our outgoing free agents. Gonna basically run down all the interesting stuff with the Seahawks right now going into this offseason. So stop on by or watch the recording later, and I hope to see you guys there. So, got a little bit of news last night. The Seattle Seahawks are taking a look at another defensive coordinator candidate. This is another guy who would come in from the outside. He's never been a Seahawks coach before, although it should be said that he did cross paths with John Schneider in Green Bay for a little bit. So that's the connection. And I don't know if that's the main impetus for them looking at Joe Whitt, but if you look at his career arc, it does make some sense that he would start to get some defensive coordinator buzz. Now, I'll say this before we get into the nitty-gritty of his career as an NFL coach so far. I'm not as crazy about this one as I am with Desai. I think I would like Desai better. I think I would like Donatell better. But Joe Whitt does have some things that he's done in his career that are notable and impressive, and they should definitely be discussed before we pass judgment on him. So Joe Whitt Jr. spent the most recent year as a defensive passing game coordinator and secondary coach for the Dallas Cowboys, but he spent most of his career with the Green Bay Packers. That's where he made his name. And he did some interesting things in Green Bay, and I think he does deserve credit for some things that he's accomplished, but it just doesn't quite intrigue me quite as much as Desai, and definitely not as much as Donatell. So I'll go into why as we go through this video. But first, if you take a look at Joe's resume, you can see that he's 43, so relatively young. He's been coaching since 2000, but he started in college. Made his way to the NFL with the Atlanta Falcons in 2007 as an assistant defensive back coach. And then he landed on the Packers for about a decade as a cornerback coach. For 1 year, he was a defensive quality control coach. Then he went over to the Cleveland Browns for a year, Atlanta Falcons for a year, and Dallas Cowboys for a year. So he was under Dan Quinn in recent times, which is also notable because obviously Dan Quinn is part of the Pete Carroll coaching tree, so there's probably some connection there. And that's basically his career. Now, let's run down what he's done so far in that career and some of the interesting players that he intersected with, focusing on the NFL stuff. So, the 2007 Falcons, this was the infamous Bobby Petrino year. This was the first year where Michael Vick was grabbing his ankles in prison, and the Falcons were terrible. They went 4-12. Not a whole lot to say about them other than that they were an awful offense and an awful defense. So, not a lot to really celebrate here. Now, there were two notable players in that secondary that Joe Whitt intersected with, shall we say. But these are two players who were pretty well established before the 2007 season. Lawyer Malloy was one of them. He spent his 2007 in Atlanta, but he had already made his bones in New England and Buffalo. He was already considered a great player. So that's just a case of kind of running into him. And then you also had D'Angelo Hall, but D'Angelo Hall had already been a two-time Pro Bowler. He continued to be an effective player in 2007. He had 5 interceptions and 70 tackles. So not taking anything away from him necessarily, but still, these are not necessarily players that you would point to and say, hey, Joe Whitt developed those guys. It wasn't until he got to Green Bay that you started to see him maybe getting involved in developing some players. So in 2008, Joe Whitt became the defensive quality control coach for the Green Bay Packers. And the 2008 Packers went 6-10. It was the first year that Aaron Rodgers was a full-time starter. And their defense was not very good. It was 22nd in the league in points, 20th in yards. Not a whole lot to be impressed by here, but there are a collection of players that I want to draw everyone's attention to because as Joe Whitt's career went on, he became associated with cornerbacks and generally the secondary. So the first guy I want to draw attention to here is Nick Collins. I think we remember him. He was a safety for the Green Bay Packers for quite some time, and he had his best years when Joe Whitt was part of that coaching staff. 2008, 2009, 2010, he made 3 straight Pro Bowls, played in every game. He had a ton of interceptions over this period, 17, 3 touchdowns, 40 pass deflections, 163 tackles. One of the better safeties in the league over this 3-year period for sure. And he had his best years under with Joe Whitt involved in the coaching staff. And the next guy I want to look at here is Hall of Famer, Pro Bowler, All-Pro, All-World, All-Everything, Charles Woodson, who was a great player early in his career and then slipped for many years, and then under Whitt became a All-Pro again. So I'm not saying that Joe Whitt developed Charles Woodson. That would be crazy. But Charles Woodson really wasn't all that notable over the 2002 to 2007 portion of his career. He didn't make a Pro Bowl. He only played 1 full season, missed a lot of games. He was still good, don't get me wrong, but when Joe Whitt showed up in 2008, that coincided with Woodson starting to play like an elite cornerback again. Over this 4-year span with the Packers where he made the Pro Bowl all 4 years, he had 25 interceptions, 7 touchdowns. He averaged more than 1 pass deflection a game, 11 forced fumbles, 9 sacks. Just absolutely monstrous work. Probably the best football of Charles Woodson's life. And I'm not saying that it was all Joe Whitt's doing, but it is notable that this occurred when those two were able to link up. And the final guy I want to draw attention to is Tramon Williams, cornerback for the Packers. And he showed up in 2007, didn't play a whole lot as a rookie, but in 2008 on, he became an important part of that secondary at the cornerback spot, played almost every game over an extended period of time, almost all of it being, well, actually all of it being spent with Joe Whitt in some capacity on the coaching staff. Played almost 100 games, 27 interceptions, 111 pass deflections, pass deflection a game, 376 tackles. So these secondary players that Joe Whitt is involved in had some pretty remarkable success while he was there. Tramon Williams even made a Pro Bowl in 2010. So there's some pretty impressive stuff here in terms of players that he was involved in. And I think it's worth noting as we go forward. So the 2009 Packers went 11-5, so they were a better team. Their defense was much improved. I think Charles Woodson actually won Defensive Player of the Year. 7th in points, 2nd in yards. It was one of the best defenses in the league. They were really good overall against the pass for the most part. A lot of interceptions. And what a lot of people are theorizing is that Ken Norton in part got the axe because we weren't getting turnovers. So if turnovers are what you want, then this guy was involved with some pretty turnover-happy defenses, it looks like. The 2010 Packers that won the Super Bowl, their defense was, again, elite. Number 2 in the league in points. Number 5 in the league in yards. Elite pass defense. And one player that I want to point out at this point would be Sam Shields. He was a player who showed up to Green Bay in 2010, played there for the next 7 years, and went from a rookie of mild note to somebody who made a Pro Bowl, somebody who was a relatively key part of the Packers defense over 6 years. He had 18 interceptions, 66 pass deflections, 211 tackles. So Sam Shields was a guy you can point to and say that Joe Whitt helped develop that player. And he was a guy who had 4 interceptions, 2 different seasons in his career, and made a Pro Bowl. So I think that's fair to draw attention to. The 2011 Packers that went 15-1. They had a not so great defense, admittedly, although their defense was not helped by the fact that their offense was so flippin' good. But 32nd in yards, that's going to turn some heads. That's going to raise some eyebrows. But they still got a ton of turnovers, and they played well enough for that team to keep winning, I guess, is the overall point to be drawn here. The 2002 Packers took a step back, 11-5, still a pretty successful season, and their defense was above average to good, 11th in the league, decent, pretty good against the pass again. And then you go to another player that I want to draw everyone's attention to is Casey Hayward Jr. Casey Hayward showed up in Green Bay in 2012, so 2012 was that first year, and he had a great rookie year, 6 interceptions, 20 pass deflections, and then he struggled to get on the field for the next few years, but he was still considered to be a good player. And then he went to San Diego in 2016 and actually started making a couple Pro Bowls and becoming considered to be by some to be a top player. So, granted, Casey Hayward had his best seasons after leaving the Packers, but if you take a look at this, you can also see that there's some development there. He had 9 interceptions across 4 years with a lot of injuries and a lot of missed games with that Green Bay team. So you can definitely point to Joe Whitt as being a part of that development. So I think that's pretty notable as we're trying to evaluate him as a coach. The 2013 Packers went 8-7-1, barely made the playoffs. They had a pretty bad defense, so things are starting to slip a little bit now. Pass defense was starting to slip. The 2014 Packers went 12-4, so they were back in the realm of being a really good team. Not a great defense, just pretty average overall. But the pass defense is still relatively decent. So, keeping in mind that Joe Whitt at this point was a cornerbacks coach, still some pretty decent stuff. 2015, the team goes 10-6. Another fairly successful season. The defense is above average to average. It's pretty darn solid against the pass, though, overall. And I think he still probably has more good stuff than bad stuff in his Packers resume. And another player that should be drawn that should be focused on at this point would be Demarius Randall, who we know because he spent a little bit of time in Seattle. He showed up in Green Bay at this point, and he never became a great player, but over 3 years in Green Bay, he played in a decent chunk of games, had 10 interceptions, 32 pass deflections, and 126 tackles. So he played cornerback mostly for the Packers, and he was considered to be kind of a disappointment, but still good player. Interesting to note. The 2016 Packers went 10-6 and made the NFC title game, and they had a below-average defense again. Again, some of that is because their offense was as good as they were, but their secondary in particular kind of got lit up this year. They gave up a ton of yards through the air, a ton of touchdowns through the air, a lot of yards per attempt through the air. 2017, the Packers had a down season. Their defense was down. Their offense was down. Nothing was really good on this team. So not a very good year for the Packers defense in general. And then 2018 was the year they got Mike McCarthy finally canned. They went 6-9-1. McCarthy got fired before then. And the defense was again below average. Pass defense, pretty average-ish overall. 7 interceptions on the year. So things definitely got away from him at the end. I will point out real quick before we turn the page on his Packers career that he did coach Jaire Alexander during Jaire's rookie year. And Jaire Alexander, obviously supremely talented, very good player, and has become one of the better corners in the league. Not a huge playmaker, but definitely somebody who is considered to be one of the better corners in the league. So he didn't have his best seasons under Joe Whitt, but he was certainly involved in his development that rookie year. Okay, so in 2019, he went over to the Cleveland Browns. Let me scroll up here. Sorry about that. 2019, he became the secondary and passing game assistant, defensive passing game coordinator for the Cleveland Browns. This was the Freddie Kitchens Browns. They went 6-10, not a good team. Their defense was below average, but their pass defense actually mostly did the job. 7th in yards allowed and 8th in interceptions, so not too bad there. The only player of note that Joe Whitt would have directly worked with being a secondary coach was Denzel Ward. And Denzel Ward obviously was very highly drafted, so it's not like Whitt molded him out of whole cloth or anything, but Denzel Ward has been, over the last 4 years, one of the better young corners in the league. And I can't say that Joe Whitt developed him because he actually made the Pro Bowl the year before Joe Whitt got there. But we're still looking at some stuff here where he is a good player. He is playing well. He is doing some impressive things. And Joe Whitt can be credited with part of that development. At that point, Joe Whitt went to the Atlanta Falcons. And this was the last year of Dan Quinn in Atlanta. He only coached there for 5 games, actually. Falcons were awful, and their defense was below average to bad, especially their passing defense was actually near the bottom of the league in most important categories, so another not-so-good notch in Joe Whitt's resume. One thing I do want to point out, though, is A.J. Terrell, who was a first-round pick, was somebody that Joe Whitt worked with as a, a rookie. I hate these damn drop-down menus on PFTR sometimes. 2020 was his rookie year. He played in all 14 games. He had a decent season working with Joe Whitt as a rookie. And then in 2021, he actually became a really good player. PFF gives him a great grade for 2021. 3 interceptions, played in every game, 81 tackles. Considered to be one of the better younger corners in the league, so you can give Joe Whitt some points for helping develop him. Even though he wasn't there in 2021, he was there in 2020. And that brings us to 2021, where he coached the Dallas Cowboys. And obviously the Cowboys were good. Their defense was good, 7th in the league in points. Not so good in yards. Their passing defense was mixed. They gave up a lot of yards, and they also got a lot of interceptions. So I guess it just depends on your tolerance for certain things. But Joe Whitt, it was considered to be a part, at least, as a cornerback coach of developing Trayvon Diggs. And this one is very polarizing, right? Because Trayvon Diggs is like the Barry Sanders of cornerbacks, right? He either makes a huge play or he does nothing. And Diggs got burned more than anybody in the league in 2021, but he also got more interceptions than anybody in a long time. 11 interceptions, 21 passes defensed, one of the better corners in the NFL history for this season at making plays on the ball. But nobody got roasted more than Trayvon Diggs. Dude gave up well over 1,000 yards in coverage, according to pretty much everyone that I know of. So there's definitely some stuff here to like with his ability to develop corners if you give him credit for Diggs. Obviously, Diggs had a pretty good rookie year as well, so it's not like... And Diggs was a highly drafted prospect, so it's not like this is some nobody that Whitt turned into gold. But this is still impressive. And I think that you could maybe point to a couple of other improvements in the Cowboys secondary and say that Whitt had something to do with that. Guys like, he's working with a guy like an Anthony Brown who is just kind of a trash can. But I think there is some good stuff here. Overall, it doesn't really wow me the way some of these other resumes wow me. But credit where credit's due. A.J. Terrell is a recent development project for him that seems to have gone very well. Jair Alexander is now doing great things in Green Bay after spending his rookie year with him. And overall, his work in Green Bay, look at the guys he worked with during his time in Green Bay. Like I said, Nick Collins, Charles Woodson, Tramon Williams, Sam Shields, Casey Hayward, Demarius Randall. So, not bad, but not my favorite. I'll leave it at that for now. Let me know what you think down below. I'm out of here. Go Hawks.